All right. Now for the first shot regular episode of the next or the original series. Now, this is an interesting one because due to the intense special effects for this one, it actually got aired 10th. Uh, that resulted in some interesting continuity wrinkles, but hey, whatever. Anyway, so the basic plot for this one is actually incredibly simple. It's the Enterprise doing something that in TOS was actually normal and not something that it is as rarely seen as it is in later Star Trek. The Enterprise is actually increasing the Federation's understanding of the universe by charting previously uncharted sectors of space. Yep, that's it. That's the entire plot hook for stuff to happen. The Enterprise has gone to a section of space that the Federation doesn't have charts for and is charting it. Very simple. Realistically, this is something that comes up in later Star Trek. It's just that later Star Trek tends to not do this as often. TNG would often do a thing where they had like an alien of the week that had some sort of history with the Federation. Like, the Federation knows who they are and has database entry telling you their entire backstory and all that stuff. It's something that the viewers have never seen before, but in universe, the crew has heard of them at least. It's not something that's truly new, at least not often. Anyway, though, in TOS, a lot of the time it was actually the um, Enterprise going to some solar system that the Federation had never even scanned before. So, for this particular episode, what happens is that they run into, that thing. The mysterious object. Which, as some people have pointed out, the writers writing this episode gave the mysterious object a density that is several times that of air, thus suggesting that whatever its outer shell is made out of is mostly hollow. So the majority of its internal space is either air or some material even less dense than air. Interesting. Now, one thing that's something about here is that due to this being the first time scripts were written for several of the characters, their personalities are a little different than in later episodes, and you see several of their what become their later like defining characteristics established in this episode, like McCoy and his what am I, a doctor or something or other, and Spock doing weird comments about how Vulcans are different than humans and how Vulcans think differently than humans and blah 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 blah. Anyways, another thing that's interesting about this episode is that they have a relatively prominent character by the name of Mr. Bailey, or Lieutenant Bailey, who is never seen again because of the fact that, he leaves the ship. Yeah, let's just go with that. Anyways, so let's go and look at the cast before examining the story. Because, like, well, this is an interesting one because the fact that due to just how early this is and how ill-defined the concept of Star Trek was at the point, they were constantly rewriting the script, and the actual aired episode is not reflected in the final script. It's mostly the same, but only mostly. Like, had a different person as the navigator. Uh, David Bailey was the communications officer on the Enterprise instead of Uhura. Yeah, yeah, Uhura hadn't been added to the thing yet. Hmm. Anyways, first episodes for Leonard McCoy, Janice Rand, and Uhura, or at least the characters that are, shall we say, normally considered main cast characters. There's also several other characters. Oh, a lot of the costumes look different because, like, TOS actually had several variations of the costumes, and this high neck collar variant is one that's rarely seen later. Oh yeah, also it's like this episode says that humans have only been exploring space for 2 centuries, approximately. Hmm. Yeah. Anyways, has some interesting visuals of stuff here. And now we get to the cast. Okay, so this episode has one of is the first time several characters are seen, as mentioned previously. But also, it's like not just named characters, but there's several recurring characters who are not considered, like main cast and or just like straight up unnamed characters that, as it turns out, end up being long-term recurring characters even though they don't have names. And this is actually one of those things where it's like in a TTRPG where you're actually just like playing, and it's a less visual medium where you're like talking about what's going on more than actually seeing it, you would probably give them names. You're not going to call someone the yeoman for 20 sessions playing Star Trek Adventures. You're just not. You're going to give the yeoman a name and go on from there. And even by TOS standards, it's kind of weird to have a character pop up this many times and not have them ever referred to by name. Somehow, this character ended up being like that. Yeah. Jeannie Malone as the female yeoman showed up in no less than 41 episodes, and that's as the female yeoman. Granted, due to the fact this is an unnamed character, it's not clear if all of these appearances are actually meant to be the same character or if they're functionally indistinguishable from being the same character. Jeannie Malone's roles include a total of 13 other characters. I'm not counting this one because she isn't the main person to play that character. But a lot of these are actually just kind of sort of um, functionally extras because they have 5 people standing in a room and she happens to be one of them. That's it. I don't know of any time that she was in Star Trek where she actually did a voiced role in any way that is meaningful. Anyway, though, the sheer number of appearances is actually greater than that of Pavel Chekhov, at least in terms of the original series itself. If you add the films, Chekhov has more appearances. And yeah, he's actually a named character and something most people consider to be main cast, but he's not actually in season 1. Which is an interesting thing because of the fact that there is a line where Khan is talking about Chekhov and claims that he met Chekhov the first time he came on board the Enterprise. And Chekhov doesn't say no. In fact, Chekhov is like, yeah. I know, I know. You've seen me before, or so something to that effect. So presumably Chekhov was a member of the Enterprise crew, just not bridge crew at the time of season 1. Yeah, that's kind of a headcanon-y thing, but whatever. It fits the facts. Anyways, yeah, so yeah, it's Chekhov not in this episode. Instead, we have... Well, I'll get to him later. Oh yeah, for reference, Hikaru Sulu, 53 appearances in TOS, 19 TAS. The character who has the most appearances in TOS and TAS is Spock. Actually has more appearances than Captain Kirk. And then, of course, you have all the stuff from later works, which is a lot more than Captain Kirk because William Shatner actually doesn't appear in person uh, uh, for later roles the way that Leonard Nimoy was happy to. Yeah, that was actually Leonard Nimoy in TNG. A lot of these other ones are, especially the stuff that happened after Leonard Nimoy died. Yeah, those. Yeah, they had to recast him, but hey, whatever. Anyways, so who did they have for this episode instead of Chekhov? This guy, David Bailey. Yep. David Bailey is kind of sort of a throwaway character. He's a character who ends up getting a lot of development in the episode because of the fact that the people who wrote the episode wanted you to care about the character enough that when he leaves forever to go be with Balok, you kind of sort of actually care about the fact that he's never going to be returning to Earth. Anyways, as a character, he exists. I watched the episode, and it's not a complicated character. It's a guy who is a young officer who's not sure of himself, and that's about it. Like, he actually has a thing where he's talking to Balok about how he's not a exemplary officer, and so on and so forth. And now for the real star of the show, Balok. Yeah, infamous episode. The whole like rubber decoy, which in universe is a puppet that doesn't actually look particularly lifelike. Why exactly Balok has this rubbery looking of a puppet? They didn't fully explain that, but he uses a visual effect to hide the fact that it's um, an inanimate object anyways. So, anyway, so Fesarius and assorted other craft utilized by the First Federation um, are theoretically extremely formidable vessels. It's just that Balok's not trying to win. Balok is portrayed as a person who's actually here to meet the crew of the Enterprise and learn about them. See, when they blew up the marker buoy that had been left in place, he decided to weird. He's not like, oh, you violated our space, therefore I'm going to kill you. And he's like, huh, never seen these people before. I wonder who they are. And the that's the interesting part about this is that in the end you realize that neither side was actually hostile. It's just a misunderstanding because of, it's like, oh, we've never met each other before. And we haven't, figured out how to properly coexist yet. Which they stretched that into an entire episode. Yeah. Not sure how many side quests are required for that, but yeah, that's what they did. One of the most hilarious things about the episode is that the guy who played Balok apparently didn't actually like grapefruit juice, but for the scene where they're drinking Tranya, um, he has to pretend that he likes drinking grapefruit juice. Yeah, for a 6-year-old, he was actually quite a good actor. Then again, he actually had 5 years of experience at that point in his life. Oh boy. Yeah, Clint Howard actually is, as far as I know, the actor with the longest spread between first appearance and most recent appearance of like 57 years. Because again, he got started as a 6-year-old playing Balok. That's a fun trivia for you. And he's apparently still playing roles in Star Trek. Hmm. Oh yeah, let's take a quick look at that. What is his most recent role? Strange New Worlds as Buck Martinez. Looks kind of old, but he's in his 60s now. So hey, yeah, he looks like a man in his 60s. Anyways, that's enough about that. So, what is the Fesarius, and what do we have about the First Federation? It does actually claim in the episode that this is the flagship of the First Federation. And as we see in the actual episode, the Fesarius was coming to investigate after the Enterprise destroyed a marker buoy, and also the implied scale here makes the Fesarius basically Death Star sized, and we never actually see the Fesarius fire on anything. The amount of firepower that the smaller craft dispatched by Balok had was impressive enough that this gigantic thing would probably completely obliterate the Enterprise. Oh yeah, this is also interesting here is that while they write it Spock saying a mile in diameter, if you actually look up the stats for the length of the Enterprise, um the Enterprise is something like half a mile long. The idea that the Fesarius is only 1 mile in diameter is absurd. So, anyway. Um, and yeah. Oh yeah, this is another interesting thing is that Balok was able to use the automated systems on board the Fesarius to functionally take over the Enterprise. Yeah. In terms of being advanced aliens, the First Federation are seemingly quite competent. They built this gigantic thing. It has quite a lot of firepower. And why exactly it only has Balok as the crew? What does that actually tell us about the First Federation? This is a question that would actually be very interesting to look into if you are using the First Federation in a TTRPG. So, what do we actually know about the First Federation? Um, yeah, there's a star system named Fesarius, which the ship is apparently named after the star system. Balok is the only living being ever to be identified as a First Federation citizen. And he is the captain of their flagship. Which, interesting. Also, as big as that thing is, having David Bailey living on board it would seemingly be trivial to find space for him to live in. Like, it's like I said, it's Death Star size. The Death Star has enough room inside it to hold like 1 million people. Why exactly they don't have a crew? That's something that gives you a serious pause to ponder because you know like I said, Balok is the only member of this civilization ever seen in person, as far as I know. That in and of itself says something, although it's not exactly a conclusive, definitive statement. One thing Balok does suggest about the First Federation, though, is that unlike the United Federation of Planets, they are not a civilization that wants to expand and, like conquer the universe or anything like that. They basically just use their advanced technology to protect their territory. And they don't actually have that much territory. Yeah, that's one of the weird things about First Federation space is that there's only a handful of star systems that they claim as their territory. Like it's like over here, like this area inside this red outline. Just this tiny little area over here. That's it. Huh? Um, one thing that occurs to me, and I'm not sure exactly how much proper weight this has, is that the First Federation is kind of like the stereotypical um, older race that has collapsed and stopped trying to have um, a large presence in the universe and are basically just like letting other races do that stuff instead. Thing is, they don't actually seem to maintain diplomatic contact with a whole lot of other races either. So the actual internal workings of their society is a complete mystery. And if you use them, it's something you're kind of going to need to think about in the way you use the race. Canonically, we don't know why Balok was the sole person as the crew of the flagship. Seems kind of weird. Also, he kind of sort of made comments about being lonely, as if he didn't want to be the only person on the ship, which that that raises a lot of other questions. But those are questions that I personally cannot answer. And yeah, it's like whatever answers you decide to come up with for your table, eh, just make a choice and run with it. Personally, I would actually kind of avoid using these guys because of the fact that there's more unanswered questions with them than answered questions. So you're kind of sort of just kind of like mentioning that they exist and not going any farther with it unless you like seriously want to do some like proper world building, because you would have to do world building and build on what was in the original series in order to use these guys properly. Alrighty then. Well, see you guys later.